The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Please say good morning. And I'm a big fan. Wayne Allen Root joins us. It's good to have you back on the show, brother. Good morning. Welcome back to Denver.
Hey, Peter. Great to be on with you, as always.
Yeah. Talk about yourself briefly. We ask folks to do that so people, if they've never heard you before, get an idea who you are.
Sure. I was the vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party in the 2008 election, so I was on the presidential ticket against Barack Obama. I'm Obama's college classmate from Columbia University, class of '83. I have switched back to the Republican Party, endorsed Mitt Romney at Fox News last September before the election, and may be running against Harry Reid for U.S. Senate in 2016 for the great state of Nevada, where I live. I'm the author of The Ultimate Obama Survival Guide, one of the best-selling books of 2016, one of the top 10 political books. And my new book comes out in July. It's called The Murder of the Middle Class.
Yeah. And I'm a fan of your work, and I have been proudly wearing the jacket birther now for, I don't know, pushing 10 years. And we have, I have this idea, and I don't know how many people can reach out. We're trying desperately. The one guy I want to contact is Donald Trump. I'll tell you what I'd like to do, Wayne. I'd like to do what they do in academia, where they bring together all these academicians who, for instance, scientists or astrophysicists or people about a spot in history, and they deliver papers and they have panels and they discuss that issue or that moment or whatever it is, and they reconfigure things. Wouldn't it be great to have a gathering of people who are seeking the truth about Barack Obama's life? And, yourself, I give you 20 guys right now, men and women, that I'd love to see, stand and speak and offer evidence and present a paper at the end of all it, a white paper at the end of all of it. And the one guy that I can think of that could underwrite all these crazies coming together and give them a place to stay would be Trump, because, as you know, and anybody who else watches, the news media made Trump look like a fool when they brought that phony birth certificate in, as I say, made by Jimmy down the hall. How about that for an overall? Can you speak to that concept, and then let's talk about the SSN?
Well, yeah, and I could speak to the fact that when we were at Columbia University, we learned from quite a few different books in all of our political science classes. Obama was a political science major. I was a political science major, and the major book that we all studied was Solinsky, Rules for Radicals.
Sure.
And if you read that book, the number one goal is to make anyone who's your opponent look like they're insane, look like they're crazy, look like they're radical, demonize them and denigrate them and make them look like fools, even if they're telling the truth and even if they're dealing in facts. And that's exactly what the opposition of Barack Obama does. He tries to make everyone who questions him look like a crazy person. All I've ever said is that when I went to Columbia University, I've honestly answered that I was a political science major. I knew everyone in the entire political science department, and there was no Barack Obama. Never saw him, never heard of him, never met him, don't know another person who ever saw him or met him. And I even went out of my way to track down the number one professor ever at Columbia University, Dr. Henry Graff, called him in his house and said, listen, there's no way to graduate Columbia as a political science major without going to your class. Did you ever have Barack Obama? He said, Wayne, I'm the presidential historian of Columbia University's history. I know everything about every politician who ever went to Columbia, and certainly I know of every president in this country's modern history, and all my students who have ever gone on to any political position. I followed them all, and I'm a big fan of yours, Wayne. And there was no Barack Obama in any of my classes. And I've spoken to all the other professors, and none of them ever had Barack Obama in their classes. So I've repeated this in the media, which is nothing more than a fact. And the result of that is I had a 15-minute tirade on national TV by Rachel Maddow on MSNBC saying Wayne Root is a kook, a conspiracy theorist, a nutcase, and a crazy man. This is me, a guy who's never been in my whole life a conspiracy theorist. I'm a self-made millionaire. I'm a talented guy at everything I do. I've never said a word about a conspiracy theory. This is what the left does to people who dare to speak out and tell the truth about Barack Obama. All I've said is there's something wrong with his story. His narrative isn't right. Somehow, some way, he's a Manchurian candidate. he wasn't at Columbia University that anyone I know could verify. So it's a very strange story.
Yeah, you and I come to the conclusion of that use of his SSN, and he has. Before we come back to your witnessing, I'm like you. I mean, I personally believe that he has a social security number that's not his, but I believe he really actually has a real one. And that real one, I think, was either designated to a foreign national or whatever else Obama presented himself as. And that's the one I think if anybody could chase down, for instance, the Baskin-Robbins, and that one that he, in his book, is probably the only true thing in his book, that he worked in the Baskin-Robbins when he was a kid in Waikiki, I think it is. Don't hold me to that. But I think he worked at that Baskin-Robbins. There would be a Social Security number on that job app. And I guarantee it's not the one he has now. Why do you think he has that SSN?
You know, he's just had a very strange, exotic background. We know he grew up in Indonesia. There's nothing about that anybody could argue with or deny. I mean, he went to Indonesia with his mom. I'm friends with people who are investigative reporters and went to Indonesia and literally went to the school where Barack Obama attended, the elementary school. He's a little kid in Indonesia.
Yeah, sure.
And they found the papers at the principal's office, in his files. And the papers literally say that Barack Obama was adopted by his mom's dad,
sure, right.
and that he's an Indonesian citizen. He took Indonesian citizenship and had to, because you can't attend public schools in Indonesia without being an Indonesian citizen. So he's a little kid. So things like that have happened in his past. Very strange.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he used that to get into Columbia University because that put him to the top of the head of the list.
Yeah, I do too.
So I've always guessed that he got into Columbia with lousy grades by portraying himself as an Indonesian foreign citizen.
No, I absolutely agree with that. And I just don't know when the SSN number switch took place. But, of course, because everything is hidden, locked away, deep-sixed, protected by law firms, you can't see it, can you?
No, you can't see it, and that's what's interesting. When Harry Reid made his guess during the Romney campaign, his terrible guess or his lie that Mitt Romney never paid taxes, Mitt Romney released his tax returns and proved that he did pay taxes, and the Senate Majority Leader looked like a fool and a liar, and nobody cares. No one on the left said a word. No one in the media said a word about the terrible thing Harry Reid did. But when I made my guess that Barack Obama, at the same time that happened, I said, listen, Harry Reid has opened the door. If he can guess about Mitt Romney's taxes, which he hasn't seen, I can guess about Barack Obama's college records, which no one has seen. And I believe they're hidden because they'll say that he was an Indonesian foreign student and that's how he got into Columbia.
No, I believe that.
Well, you know what? They've never been released since I said it. He had plenty of chance to make me look foolish, never released it, which tells me to this day his records are sealed. He's got something terrible to hide. But it really doesn't matter, Peter. In the end, we don't need that issue. In the end, he's the worst president in American history. He's destroyed the American economy. He's killed jobs. Everything has gone bad. The Obamacare is singularly the worst bill ever passed in the history of America, rammed down our throats and taking away health care for millions of people, including cancer patients, little children with cancer. I can't, the number of friends that I've personally got who have lost their insurance and now can't get another policy because they wait on the phone lines for 6 hours at a time. If you've ever tried to call Obamacare, there's no way to get through. And so this entire country has been screwed up by this man. So, we don't have to talk about his background. We could talk about present day. He is, without a doubt, the worst president in American history.
Here's the thing that I think is interesting it's not how many people signed up for Obamacare, how many people have paid. And the answer is very few people have paid. You can sign up, but if you don't pay, that's where the rubber meets the road. So for another time when you're on a radio show, if these people claim sign-ups, well, that's fine.
Right.
But what about paying? And paying.
Right. Well, I've seen the stats, and very few of his supporters are willing to pay for anything.
Well,
they thought it was free health care.
No, they don't pay.
So when the bill comes, that's $20 a month. Something you and I would say, "Wow, that's cheap." Yeah. They say, "But I thought it was supposed to be free." Yeah. The percentage of his supporters who have signed up and now have refused to pay the first bill is astronomical. Yeah. They're not even willing to pay $20 a month or $5 a month. You know, and the only way they could pay the 5 or the 20 is with another welfare payment from Barack Obama.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about a group of voters. You know, my belief is that Obamacare is going to bring down the whole health care system. I said this from day one. And, of course, that may very well have been their plan. When it brings down the system, then they say you have to go to single payer. There is no chance to make it work with a private industry. So it may very well have been the plan from day one to make sure you eliminate health insurance and put government 100% in charge. It's a disaster. And the question is whether it's a mistake disaster or whether it's a purposeful disaster.
Well, come back to his SSN, and when do you think he picked up the one he uses now, which of course is not his, and it's issued of all places from the state of Connecticut? We're talking a lot about Connecticut with the gun stories, but it comes from Connecticut, a place he never was, a place his father never was, or if his father went there, he went there on a weekend from Harvard. I remember Bill O'Reilly saying his father got it for him when he went to Harvard. Bill O'Reilly's got more gas. It's a wonder he can't float, but you wonder about this. And so riddle me this. Where does he get the SSN and how?
You know, on this one topic, I'm not the perfect guest. I just don't know anything about the SSN topic. I just know that it's an absolute fact that it's a fake. I don't know anything about how he got it, where he got it. The only thing I've ever commented on is that, you know, because I went to college with him, because he was my classmate, class of '83 at Columbia, because we're both political science majors, because we're both pre-law, and I never heard him, never saw him, never met him, don't know anyone who ever heard of him, saw him, or met him. It's a very strange story, and his background is extremely mysterious, extremely dangerous, extremely frightening from that standpoint. And I've never been an expert on the birth certificate, never been an expert on the SSN. Don't claim to be. I just have commented as a former classmate about what I knew about Columbia, and then I've gone out of my way, Peter, to comment day and night about the scandals of the present-day Obama administration, from the IRS scandal where he sicked the IRS on me, and I spent 3 years under vicious IRS attack.
I know.
You know, to Benghazi, to the AP scandal, to Fast and Furious, to the Fox News reporter, to the promise of if you want your insurance, you can keep it. There's a long list, but the reality is, you know, you're worrying about his past, and I'm saying his past is mysterious and dangerous, something's wrong, but the present is even more dangerous. He is a criminal. Once you've said, I'm a businessman, and I've spent years selling millions of dollars of products on TV, and if you ever say something like, if you want your insurance, if you like your insurance, you can keep it. If you like your doctor, you can keep it. If you like your hospital, you can keep it. And it turns out not to be true in the private sector, you go to prison. It's called fraud. But a politician somehow is allowed to lie to the American people, and millions of people's lives are changed and damaged for the worst. And no one's threatening prison or fraud or impeachment. It makes no sense. This was a damaging, terrible thing he did to the American people and hurt people, and it's going to take people not only insurance away, but their money away from them. How many middle-class Americans are going to see their insurance raised by $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 a year, and they can't afford it? And guess what, Peter? I said from day one, that was the plan, because he's taking the middle class and he's turning them into welfare wards of the state, where if you can't afford a $20,000 a year health insurance, you only make $60,000 or $100,000. You can't take 20 of it and apply it to health insurance. You're now going to suddenly become a person who needs a government check to save you. That's how you turn everyone into welfare queens, and that's exactly what Barack Obama's intent was from the first day of Obamacare.
We brought this question up in Open Lines, had good conversation on it this morning here on 710. What do you think the end game is for the progressive?
Well, I know the end game, because the one thing I could tell you about Columbia University, let's assume I'm wrong and he was there. Let's assume I just never saw him. And I've always said it's a very real possibility. He's an arrogant guy. The way he runs, the way he's handled the presidency is probably the way he handled Columbia University. Once he got in, he thought he was arrogant and too smart and above it all and never had to go to class. And he spent his time at Columbia hanging out, smoking pot, plotting the end of capitalism with his friends and going to Communist Party meetings. That's probably what he did. He probably never went to class and spent his time doing that. So let's assume he was there and hanging out with Columbia University.
I'll pause you again. If in fact, because personally I believe he was there, who did they think he was? And no, when everything is sealed, then everything's fair game. Who do you think they thought he was?
I think he sold himself as an exotic, foreign national from Indonesia who had traveled the world and had an exotic background, and and the white mother and the father from Kenya, who was, a talented politician who went to Harvard. And I think they loved that at Columbia. I mean, I know the Columbia administration at the time and now. I know what they're like. I speak to them, and they're all liberal to the point of communist. Most of them bragged in my day about hating capitalism and hating America and thinking we're a racist country, and they wanted to bring the system down. And he would have been a perfect guy for that narrative. They would have thought, wow, what a wonderful guy to pal around with. What a wonderful guy to have bragging rights to, that our school has a student from Indonesia. We have students from 180 countries around the world represented, and now we've added 181 Indonesia. It would have been a perfect narrative for all the liberals at Columbia who hated you if you were white and straight and a normal kid who loved America, which is what I was, a son of a butcher. They couldn't stand that. That was literally proof that anyone could make it in America, even a blue-collar butcher's kid. And they don't want that proof. Their narrative that they love is that the world has to be multicolored diversity and everyone has to sing Kumbaya together. And so he would have been their perfect little pet in those days. We let this kid in from Indonesia with terrible grades from Occidental and Hawaii, and he spent the world, his life traveling the world. That would have been the narrative. Okay. But my point is, if he was there, Peter, and let's assume he was at Columbia, the fact is all the students all the time talk politics, at least the political science ones that I hung around with. And they were always debating politics. They were always talking about a plan that they hoped would one day destroy America called Cloward-Piven, named after Francis Cloward and Richard Piven, two Columbia professors, a husband-wife team from right before when we were there. They were at Columbia for many years, and then they switched over to NYU. And their plan was the way the left hoped to one day change America and take down capitalism. And every single word of that plan, every aspect of it, is what Obama is using right now to take down the American economy. Very simple plan. You have to overwhelm the system with spending and entitlements and debt until the country is drowning and toppling over. And once it topples, people will get on their knees and beg government to save them, which opens the door for big government socialism. That's exactly the end game. That's it right there. There's no other need to know anything else about Barack Obama.
As a final question, and this time, and you'll be back soon, what does it look like when the smoke clears?
Well, I think it's looking a lot like it now. I mean, I'm a small businessman, Peter, and all my friends, I'm an odd guy. In the media, everyone's a journalist. Everyone's an expert. Everyone's a think tank, all your guests. Very rarely do you have a person, even from the right, like me, who really is a small businessman who owns businesses with 1, 2, 5, 10 employees on the ground, and who could tell you what's happening. And I'm telling you, the country is being bankrupted. The rich are getting richer on Wall Street. All he does, Obama and the Fed, is take care of the Ponzi scheme on Wall Street and make sure the market goes up every day by stealing your children's future and pumping debt into the stock market to make everyone there fabulously rich, who then donates to him. But none of it trickles down to Main Street, and all my friends are dying. If you own a restaurant, a dry cleaner, a hardware store, a small real estate office, you're either out of business, you're hanging on by the skin of your gums, and you're taking your life savings and pumping it in to make payroll. There is no money on Main Street. America, you know that old joke that a politician's support seems really good, but it's like a mile wide and an inch thick? Yeah. That's what America's economy is right now. On the outside, it looks okay, not collapsing, certainly it's surviving with a high stock market. But when you dig just an inch deep, the country is in such severe trouble. The economy is an inch away from collapse, and anyone who owns a business on Main Street is starving. Their revenues are 80% lower than 5 years ago, and they can't even take home pay anymore. If you own a business, your money goes to keeping the employees, not to keeping yourself and your mortgage paid. So this country is in so much trouble, Peter. So the end game is a total financial collapse, and no one knows what to do. There's panic in the streets, and Obama institutes socialism, or the next guy does if it takes the last of Obama's 3 years. That's what I predicted in my book, The Ultimate Obama Survival Guide, a depression and a total collapse. And it's happening right in front of our eyes, except for the stock market. And guess what's funny about my story? The exact same thing is happening in Venezuela, which is basically a communist country. Venezuela has an all-time record high stock market. Well, the people are starving in the streets. There's a toilet paper shortage, and there's a food shortage. And let me tell you something. Sadly, tragically, that exact scenario is coming to America because Obama's playing the same card as Hugo Chavez is playing in Venezuela. Same thing's happening in Argentina. Same thing's happening in Cuba. When you believe in socialism or communism, this is the end result.
We'll talk soon. Thanks for coming on the show, bro. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Peter. The book is The Ultimate Obama Survival Guide, and my website is root4america.com.
Wayne
Thank
Allen.
you.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.